Hello and welcome back to the Python Crash Course on Dumb as Code. I am Chris Franklin. Alright, so hopefully you watched the first lesson, and you now are at least vaguely familiar with the concept of expressions. You know that they are a combination of values and operators. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look at values a little more closely, because values are a core part of the Python programming language. Now, when we talk about values, what are they actually? What is a value? Well, what we're going to talk about today are data types. Data types are just a category for a value. So every value belongs to exactly one data type. Now, when I talk about data types, I don't mean, anything abstract. I'm talking about three specific things as the common data types in Python. And let's go ahead and run through those right now. Now, if you followed the first lesson, you saw that we dealt a lot with the integer type and the float type. Those are two of the three core data types in Python. So if we're talking about the number 2, that is an integer. If we're talking about 2.1, that is a float. Those are the two types of mathematical values that we can work with inside of Python. The third common data type that you'll work with most is strings. So if I type the string hello, I put it in quotes, I hit the button, it returns back, it evaluates to the word hello. So those are the three common data types that you're going to be working with the most. You can perform a whole lot of different activities on those, and you have specifics when you're dealing with string. You can have empty string. It's just empty quotes. That's your empty string. It can also be called a blank string. Okay, and so when we're working with strings, we can see it has its own special error messages that come up. Let's say, for instance, we're working with a string and we want to break this and try and have get rid of the ending quote on accident. Okay, well, you can see here we have a syntax error. We hit the end of line while scanning a string literal. So there's a new type of error that gets introduced when working with the string types. Okay. Now, this would be a rather short video if we stop there. So I want to talk a little bit more about strings because they are super common when working in Python, when working with all of the different tasks that we could do. So let's see some of the ways that we can interact with it. So how do we work with strings? We've already seen in the last video how to work with operators and integers and floats. So you can just use mathematical operators on them. But what happens if we mix in strings into this, since they are also values that we can work with? Well, as you can probably imagine, some of these things don't make sense. Let's see. Let's type in just a random string. So this is a combination of characters making up a sentence. Alice through the looking glass, something like that. All right. But what happens, so if we hit enter here, we get just the string back. But what happens if we try to add something? So let's try and add an integer value to it. What's going to happen? Well, as you can see, we can only concatenate string, not int. What does this mean? Well, str is shorthand for string, and int is shorthand for integer, as you might have guessed. So you can only concatenate strings together. You can't concatenate in an integer value. Okay. Now, we can actually fix this pretty easily. Let's just say we take a small piece of this. Let's say we take glass and we want to add 100 to it. So if I want to add 100 to it, there's a way to do this. I can use a shorthand operator called str, and I can turn this into a string. Okay, so I can cast the 100 from an integer into a string type, and I tell it, I want this to be a string. Python is loosely typed, which means we can change the types pretty easily. and we'll get into that more when we get into assigning variables, but know that this is one of the ways that we can change variable types here. Okay. Another one of the operators that's kind of interesting is if we take and we do the multiplication. Okay. Let's say we want to see glass 50 times. Okay. Times 50. What do you think will happen here? Well, it's actually kind of interesting. It takes and it appends glass to itself 50 times and creates a new string here. Okay. All right. So if we try and combine these in with the other core types, we'll get some error messages. Like if we say glass and instead of times an integer, let's say we multiply it by another thing. So let's say, looking here, and we hit enter, what are we going to have happen? Well, you can see you can't multiply a sequence by a non-integer of type string. So we're actually trying to multiply a sequence of strings together, but you're multiplying it by another string. That doesn't make any sense to Python, so there's an error. Another case here, if we look at glass and we try to multiply it by 5.0 instead of 50, okay? 5.0, which is a float. Do we think that'll work? You might think it'll work, but actually you can't, because as the last error message showed you, you can't multiply that sequence by a non-integer type, okay? Float is a different type. So that's pretty much it. That's everything you need to know about the core common types. We'll be talking about more complicated types in later lessons, but for now, this will get you started with everything you need to know. So I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.